When I was about 3 years old, I started seeing spirits. And my parents were not really alarmed by this. My dad was concerned, but both my mother and my father had mediumistic ability. So they too could see the folks that I was perceiving. And Mom thought it was cool, and she was all elated about it. My father was worried because he didn't want me being mistreated, because what has happened in my family for over the past century, I've tracked that there have been psychics and mediums on both sides. My mother was an extremely gifted psychic and medium. She could she was a precognitive psychic, so she could foretell future events. She could perceive spirits. Her grandmother, Giovanna, was a highly gifted psychic medium. My father, his sister Marjorie, his mother Isabel, and his grandmother, maternal grandmother Grace, were all psychics and mediums. So what I've seen is that psychic ability is a genetic trait, and it's a recessive trait, which means that it can skip a generation or two. So when you get two parents that possess the same recessive trait, the likelihood of one of their children having that trait increases exponentially, and that would be me. My ability started to manifest around age 3 because I started to see spirits, and I had these quote-unquote invisible friends. And I would talk to them and interact with them, but my parents could also see them since they were both mediums. So I wasn't chastised, I wasn't treated like I was weird. It was just part of life. And what my parents told me was, don't talk about it to anybody but us, because not everybody will understand. So my childhood was actually pretty happy. Throughout my entire life, I've had the ability to perceive spirits and communicate with spirits, and it was just part of me. It was an organic element of my personality, of my being. But as I started getting into my 20s, I realized that it was intensifying and that it must be used to help people. The big turning point in my life came when my mother died. And she and I were very close. We were both mediums, and we got along really well. And after she passed, she came to me in a very powerful visitation. And she said, "Mark, you have been given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief, but now you must use this ability to help those who are suffering with their grief." And I was practicing law full-time when this happened, and it just got to the point where that door flung open. I went through it, and I started practicing as a medium full-time. There have been many incidents throughout my life where I was able to perceive spirits. One of the most profound was when I was 19 years old. I was with a group of college friends, and we went to Germany. And so we were drinking and partying at the Hofbrauhaus in Munich and having a good time. And the next morning, we decided, well, just for historical purposes, let's go to Dachau concentration camp, which was one of the Nazi extermination camps. In fact, I think it was the first one. And when we arrived at Dachau, and I've always been a history buff, I thought this would be fascinating. I figured it'd be a little bit depressing, but nothing prepared me for what occurred. And when we got off the train and we walked through the gate, and I remember it saying in German, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes free. And then suddenly I started feeling these chills and shakes, and I was getting nauseated, and I started perceiving spirits, and they surrounded me, all these thousands and thousands of images of people wearing these black and white concentration camp outfits, and they were shrieking in horror. And I was so overloaded, and I wasn't prepared for it. And I just fell to my knees, I held my head, and I just burst into tears, and I was shaking. And of course, all my college buddies like, "Tid, what's your problem?" and giving me a hard time. And luckily, one of my friends from my neighborhood, David, came over, and he knew that my family was very spiritual and psychically sensitive. And he came and he grabbed me and he pulled me and he goes, "Come on, we're getting out of here." And he put me on a bus. He goes, "Look, I don't know what's going on, but something's going on with you, and I knew you needed to get out of there." And I was very appreciative. And looking back on it, now I realize that I wasn't protected, I wasn't focused, and I wasn't ready. I was a teenager. I was hungover. I thought I was basically going to a glorified museum, and nothing was preparing me for the reality of this. I also realized that what I was perceiving, they were probably not sentient spirits. There's three schools of thought on hauntings. One is that a spirit is trapped between this side and the other side. Secondly, that spirits from the other side come and visit a particular location. But the school of thought that I subscribe to is that this was a residual energy echo. In other words, matter retains vibration and energy. And of course, at a place like this, such horrific things happened that I was picking up on that energy, so that what I was perceiving was no more a sentient spirit than your reflection in a mirror is you. A few years ago, I visited Ground Zero in southern Manhattan where the Twin Towers went down, but I was ready for that. And I was picking up on the residual energy echo, and quite frankly, I could only handle that amount of intensity and negative vibration for about a half hour, but it did not affect me the same way it did when I was unprepared for it. I've helped over 15,000 people to date. I've conducted over 15,000 readings for people, and what I have found is that the gift of spirit communication, which I refer to as interdimensional communication, because we're living here in what we like to term the material world, the other side is a higher frequency. Think of it this way. We're all energy, as Albert Einstein said. We just vibrate at different frequencies. So we live in AM radio, the other side's FM radio, and occasionally the two frequencies overlap. And I have found through my work, and it's very humbling to see when I do readings for people who've lost a child or somebody who's lost a spouse or a parent, seeing that agony and pain come out of their face. I was doing a reading for this couple. They came to me, and I always insist that nobody know anything, that I know nothing about the people ahead of time. All I want to know is the appointment time. And this couple came to me, and the spirit of a young man came through, and I could see them begin to tremble. It was their son. And I could see an impact sensation to my head, and I felt shattering glass, and I said, this feels like a motor vehicle accident, and indeed it was. And then I said, Michael Jackson. I said, he said he met Michael Jackson? And that's a pretty strange thing to say. You know, that's like saying, oh, Elvis popped in for lunch. But then the look on their faces, the husband said, nobody knows this, but our son loved Michael Jackson, and we played a Michael Jackson song at his funeral. So I'm thinking, well, that's it. He goes, no, what people don't know is on the way home in the car, my wife, and she's nodded and the tears are coming out of her eyes, she said, I wonder if he'll meet Michael Jackson in heaven. And the answer to her question came a year later during this session for me. And these people came in with their heads down and so sorrowful. And when they left, they were smiling ear to ear, and they hugged me and they said, thank you so much for letting us know that our son's in heaven.